Hello, and welcome to the Through the Veil podcast. I'm Melissa Kemrudin, your host, and today you will be hearing a conversation I had with Danielle, where she shares her 4 birth stories, or 6 birth stories actually, the births of her 6 daughters, 4 in the system and 2 outside of the system. I loved this conversation. Enjoy. Hey Danielle, welcome. Hi, I'm so excited for our conversation today. I don't know if I had told you this, but it's just occurred to me here. You were like almost my first introduction to ever hearing about freebirth was yeah, when we were both at a flock, yeah, like a doula retreat kind of thing, and talking about ways to birth, and you were talking about having had this free birth. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. And you're like, nobody there, just you and your partner. And I was like, she's insane. Like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And I think you mentioned like Free Birth Society and that there's these podcasts. And later I downloaded an episode and I probably listened to 5 minutes and I was like, who are these people? And just like, I was not ready for it. And of course, since then I've listened to probably like every episode and have had 2 free births. Like, I've come around, but you
And it's
were
addicting.
Yes, you were my introduction. Yeah, to all that. It's a totally new paradigm outside of what we're taught. So I'm so excited you're here to share your birth stories in full because I've just sort of heard like, the little mention of it a few years ago. So excited for this. So yeah, tell us about your journey into motherhood. Can we start with well, first, like you have 6 babies? Yes. Oh,
My oldest is 16 and my youngest is 3. So, and everybody else in between.
so oldest 16, did you say oldest 16, youngest 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're similar. I have oldest 15, youngest little baby, but also a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
hmm Yes.
Um,
Okay, so tell us, yeah, start with that first birth.
so my first 4 were in hospital, and my oldest, I was 18 and very much a rule follower, did not step outside the line. Um, but I had a bit of a unicorn of a doctor who very much had faith in my body probably more than I did, in that, like, yeah, you're having a baby, let's do this kind of thing. And um, so I went through all the steps. It started with the, do you want an early ultrasound? And I went, uh, I don't know, you tell me, because you're the doctor, you're the expert. And he's like, well, basically, I don't see any reason that you need it. It's for testing for, like, oh, what's it called? I've been so far out of the system so long I don't remember. But like for
Or
Down
like
syndrome
prenatal
and stuff, I
testing?
guess.
Yes, like a
Yeah,
NIT,
like
it's
those
called.
ones.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And he's like, so would there be anything that would happen that you would terminate your pregnancy, like based on the test? And I was like, well, no, this is my baby. Like, I'm super excited to have this baby. Like, that I wouldn't love it any less. All that, I was 18 and that was.
Mhm.
And he's like, okay, well then, why bother? I'm like, oh, okay. So we skipped out on some things that are probably more standard, I guess. And it was because the assumption that nothing is wrong with you just because you're pregnant was kind of how he operated, which is, now looking back, maybe kind of odd in the medical
Mhm.
system. Um, so that there was like nothing exciting other than I was really sick and puked a lot through the whole thing. And I don't know, I was just pregnant and continued on with my normal life. And uh, when I was, I think, 3 days before I was due, I woke up and I was leaking. And so I went into our local hospital, which does not have a maternity ward, and they checked to see if it was amniotic fluid. It came back negative, and they told me, well, aren't necessarily right. Like the tests might not be accurate because the first one we tried was actually expired and whatever. It was a gong show because they don't usually deal with
Yeah.
pregnancy like almost at all, but it was convenient. So I was like, well, let's go check this out. So they told me to go to the hospital where I deliver, which was almost 2 hours away. So we drove in and they swabbed and it was negative. And they told me that I was probably peeing myself. And I like laughed at them. I was like, no, no, I'm not. Like, it's been leaking down my legs since like for the past, I think it'd been almost 18 hours at that point. And I'm like, That's not what it is." Like, "Oh, yeah, you just don't understand. Like, that's how it is." I'm like, "What? No." So again, coming back to me having more faith in myself than the system all of a sudden because it wasn't like, "You're lying to me. I know. You can't
Yeah.
tell me I don't." Like, that doesn't make sense. So finally, they had a student doctor come in, and he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna take one more swab. We're gonna put it on a microscope, like on a slide, and I'll go check it out." And I could hear him screaming down the hallway. He's like, "Oh, oh my gosh, oh my God. There's Christmas trees, there's Christmas trees." Allegedly, that means it's amniotic fluid. And he's
Yes.
like, I can't believe you were right. Your water is broken." I'm
I
like,
love that he can't believe
well,
it. That a woman could know her
yeah,
own body.
exactly. I'm like, well, I knew I wasn't peeing myself, so Um, so that was but then, of course, it's been 24 hours and you've been leaking amniotic fluids. Now everyone's in a panic. So we had to induce immediately for the safety of the baby, who I was an idiot and everything was fine up until
Yeah.
that moment. So that's kind of like, yeah, obviously everything was going downhill and no
Yeah.
one noticed. Like, what? So they used Cervidil, and that's like the tampon thing they like stick
Yep.
inside. And they told me, like, maybe something will happen, maybe nothing will, because I'm 2 days pre due date at this point, and it's your first baby. Like, that's like whether or not anything happens, I was like closed, like at a zero station. Like, I was not
Not ready.
ready
Yeah.
by their standards. Like, I shouldn't, other than the leaking water, there was no, like, I wasn't ready to be induced, basically. So, okay, so I called my mom. And my partner was with me at that point there because he brought me in. Um, we called my mom. We're like, okay, they're inducing me. Don't hurry because she's like 2 hours away, right? But we don't know what or if anything will happen. But just so you know, that's where we're at. About 20 minutes later, my partner, her father, was on the phone screaming at my mother, "Why are you not yet?"
Oh.
Because the contractions were one on top of each other, and the nurses were coming in and telling me it was dramatic. It didn't hurt yet. It is my first baby. I have at least another 12 hours to go. I'm being
Oh my gosh.
ridiculous. Like, steady. Just, oh, and also, "You're so tiny. You're not even ready to have this baby yet. That baby won't even make 6 pounds." Like, you're all the things about how I
Oh my gosh. How you couldn't
don't know.
know.
I couldn't. No, not possible. So finally, they convinced uh, one of the nurses or whatever to check me, and she poked baby in the head. So I had gone from like 0 to 9 in an hour or something. So
Wow.
I was I was like tearing face cloths with my teeth, and they wouldn't give me any medication because I was being dramatic and it was too soon. So then they threw me in a wheelchair because I was still in like antepartum. I wasn't
Oh.
in the labor ward. So they
Mhm.
threw me in a wheelchair and ran screaming down the hallway, and like me literally screaming down the hallway. And I'm like, but I wanted an epidural.
Oh.
And so we got there and they're like, okay, we'll try. They called someone in. They stuck the needle in my back. I laid down. Oh, caught the baby. Okay, cool. So,
Wow.
and then a nurse walks up with a bag of like fluid and she's like, did someone need this for an epidural? So I got the needle in my back and no drugs because
Oh.
they hadn't actually made it to the room before I had her. So that sucked.
Wow, that is a very fast first baby. First babies are usually
Yeah,
the, like, the initiation
it
of
was.
30 hours.
Yeah, it was less than 3 hours from, like, my
Mm,
first, like, contraction or, like, when they put the Cervidil inside, to when I was holding her. So,
that's
that
incredible.
was that was, like, looking back now, it was very much, look, I knew better than the system did because on every single step, I was, like, yelling at them, and my mom was yelling at them, like, "Listen to her." Like, quit telling her she doesn't know. Quit telling her it's another 12 hours when all of a sudden you're in a panic because you don't even have gloves on to catch a baby. Like, all the things. So I think looking back, that was the beginning of setting me up for, you know what? Maybe being the rule follower and saying, like, you're the expert, you know, isn't going to work. So my second baby was almost identical.
Mm.
A week before I was due, I started leaking. I went in, they told me, "No, no, no, it's too early, you're probably not." But that time the test came back positive, and they're like, "Oh, I can't believe it." Yeah, I know. We've been through this. I know. But same thing. They're like, "Okay, it's been 24 hours of you leaking. Now it's an emergency. Gotta get the baby out. So we'll induce you." They stuck Cervidil in, and I went, "Okay, like before you induce me, go get the freaking epidural because I want it." And they're like, "No, no, no, we can't do that. Our policy is at least you have to be at a 5." Or I'm like, "Then we're not gonna have time. I'm not gonna get one." They're like, "That's not how that works. That's not how induction works. It's not that fast." Honey,
You
yeah, it
couldn't
is.
know.
My children are 14 months apart. So like I literally did this a year ago. I
Yeah.
don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. So that time they're like, "Okay, fine." Came in, they stabbed me 7 times and couldn't find the epidural space, so I gave up. I didn't get my epidural anyway.
The nurse was quite confident that she could not catch a baby, so I had to wait because the doctor wasn't there yet. So they held my legs together by bunching holding the, um, sheets next to my legs so I couldn't spread them apart,
Oh,
because I wanted to push. So, finally, the
that's
doctor walked
awful.
in. Yeah. And she came, like, flying out, and she was 2.5 hours from when they, like, put the surgery in to when I was holding her. But she came out blue, like, blue,
Mm.
blue. And the doctor was, "Oh, look, you birthed a little Smurf, ha, ha, ha." And I'm like, "That's not funny, she blue." And, like, you should see the pictures. She is blue, like, blue, but she was
Mhm.
bruised from the top from ramming into my, pelvis bone while they were holding my legs together. Like,
Yes.
guess what? Anybody can catch a baby. It didn't need to be
Yeah,
his
they
hand.
just come out. They just come out,
Like,
like, they'll just be on the bed, like
yeah, that would have
yeah,
been better.
100%, that's abuse. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
and like, post each of these birth stories, I would laugh through them and be like, "Ha ha ha," like, "This is such a funny thing that happened." And now looking back, I'm like, "That is horrific."
Yeah,
Like, no one should go through that, actually.
yes, agreed.
Um, so again, that's back to being like, I knew what we needed to do, what I needed, and them telling me otherwise caused so many more issues. So
Mhm.
my third baby, um, was my first introduction to natural and significantly less pain, I guess. So
Mm.
we decided we were gonna try and birth at the closer hospital. So there was one that was about half an hour away, but with my first 2, we had been, like, in the process of moving and stuff, so I wanted to, like, keep my doctor and that kinda thing, so that was why we went and drove the 2 hours to that hospital so I could have both parents there. Um, so with 3rd daughter, we were living there, and it was the first with my husband. So, um, we decided to try out this closer hospital. It's about a half hour away. Great. It was the night of my due date. I started having contractions. We called my parents, "Hey, come stay with the older girls. We're gonna go in." So we went into the hospital, and it was around like 1 o'clock in the morning. I just got there and they checked me and they're like, "Oh, you're only at like 4 or something." And we checked in 5 minutes apart. But our policy is that dads can't stay on the ward except for in visiting hours. So we're gonna send him home, and when you're having baby, we'll call him back. And I'm
So you're
like,
supposed to be
I,
alone?
yeah. So I um had only been in labor for like 2 hours at this point, and my last baby came in 2.5. So you're gonna send him home, which would be an hour drive, like half hour there, half hour back. He's gonna miss the birth of his first baby. Like, what? No. So
Have you,
I put
like,
my
heard if that policy is real? Like, is that
yeah, it
it's
it
happened to other
100% was.
people?
Yeah, and most people don't like their husbands as much apparently. Because my one friend, she's like, "Oh, it was so nice. I just had like everyone was taking care of me." And I'm just like, What's wrong with you?"
Yeah. I need my person, not
Yeah.
strangers.
I don't want just random people willing to
Mm-mm.
serve me. I'm like, "No, he's standing here and I'm yelling at him about what he did to me. It's fine."
That's our process.
Yes, this I gotta do that. But so I put my pants back on, signed out AMA, and we got out to the truck and he goes, "I don't have enough gas to get to Saskatoon because it's 2 hours away."
Yeah.
So we went to Exxon, got some gas, and then drove faster than you should all the way to the hospital and literally ran me up in a wheelchair. I like threw my leg over the bed to get onto the hospital bed and my water broke everywhere. And like 2 contraction planers, somebody was catching a baby. I don't know if it was
Oh,
a doctor. I have no idea.
no.
But it so that labor was all happening in a car, which was terrible. Don't really recommend it.
No.
um and a little bit backstory, I guess, for that too, is after that birth, the doctor called me in at like her 6-week checkup or whatever and told me that he couldn't be my doctor because I was a danger to myself and my baby.
What?
Because I had left in labor. Like, all you had to do was let my husband stay with me.
So he's like, "To protect us all, you'll have no doctor."
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, say, "What?"
Okay.
Okay. Um, and so I actually made quite a few complaints about that whole
Yeah.
situation, and, they put me on a board, and it took 3 years, but we got the policy reversed, so that is no longer a thing in that hospital. Um,
Wow. Good for
you're
you.
allowed to have support in labor. It's a crazy
How
concept, but yeah.
delightful.
Um, okay, so then with my 4th baby, because of all the drama that had happened with my 3rd, I went back to the doctor that had just delivered with the first 2 and was like, "I guess I'll just go to Saskatoon in the first place, like the 2-hour away hospital, because I'm not dealing with that gong show this round." So that doctor's like, "Okay, but you have your baby so fast that in order to prevent a highway baby," and she's born in February, so in a blizzard, um, "let's just induce you early." Okay,
Oh my gosh,
let's
they weren't like,
do that.
was there an option of midwives in your community?
No, we're too
Mm.
well, no, at that time, I don't think there was at all, but
'Cause it seems like home
then
birth is, like, the obvious answer, not, like, evict your baby before she's ready.
yeah, we were too rural. So in Saskatchewan, even now where we were living, you aren't allowed to have a midwife because you're too far from the hospital.
Oh,
Um,
so they nobody practices.
yeah, and like the closer hospital doesn't have midwives, and then the farther one, it's too far away. So, um, yeah, so that was the plan then. We're like, "Oh, we'll just evict her, yeah, early, and then she won't be born outside of the highway." Great. Okay. This is a good plan. So then it was like literally, "So what day's convenient for you?" So, "Okay, yeah, let's do that." So she was, uh, like 2.5 weeks before her due date. I went in, and they did Cervidil, and they said, "Oh, it'll be days," because, you know, that's how Cervidil works. My experience said otherwise, and I told them that. Um, so within about 20 minutes, I was in more pain than I've ever been in my entire life. Like, and there was a gosh, I told my husband, like, I think my water broke. And he's like, no, it's all blood. I'm like,
Ooh,
that's not great. Like, and I was in, like, yeah, this is my fourth baby, and I was in more pain than I had ever been. So he ran to the nurse's station and goes, something like, you need to come and check and see what's going on. And they're like, it doesn't look that fast, honey. Like, go, she'll be fine. Just go back. So he came back. He's like, they won't come. And I'm like, no, like, you need them to come, because every contraction I was bleeding more and more and more. They're like, there's a lot of blood. Oh, honey, it's birth. There's blood. Yeah, but this is a force, and this is
yeah.
not normal. Like, it wasn't normal. So finally, they came to check, and the like strip they do when you got like continuous monitoring.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't registered. It was like the line would go off the chart, and then it would come back to Earth.
So, like, her heart
And
they didn't have her heart rate, or her heart
yeah,
rate
and
was
the contractions though, like how strong the contractions
yeah.
are, were off the chart. Like, they weren't registered. They were like, so like here, and they like rip the cervidil out of me, and they're like, oh my goodness, she's like overreacting to it. No shit, Sherlock. Like, okay. And then they look, oh my gosh, there's a lot of blood. No shit, Sherlock. Run me down the hall to labor and delivery. Like, we're gonna have to be like, baby's gonna have to come out. That's so, yeah, let's say. And so um basically, same story all over again. And so she came out pretty quickly, and it was lucky they were as unorganized as they were, because I probably would have ended up in a section, but
Yes.
they were not, and I had her teeth fast, so then I was holding her. My placenta was torn. I had had a partial abruption,
Yeah.
so because of the induction,
The
and
Cervidil, yeah.
yeah, because my body reacts like wildly to it, which we knew of the first two times, but I don't have a clue because I'm just a layperson, not a medical person.
Right, it's only happening to your own body.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have a clue at
Right.
all. But so then everything was like, she was fine, and I was fine, and everything was okay, but we lost a lot of blood, but no one was too concerned about anything. She didn't cry. They smacked her, they stabbed her feet with needles to make her cry because she wouldn't cry, but she was okay.
Was she
And
breathing?
yeah, yeah, she was just like
Well, leave her
floppy and
alone.
wouldn't cry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she wasn't everything they hoped out of her, I guess. But
Okay,
she
the
was,
textbook, right? Mhm.
yeah, yeah, she didn't fit the box kind of deal.
Yeah.
So that was kind of traumatic all around. And
Yeah.
um so then I got pregnant again. Went back to my doctor. Um so this was with number 5. I didn't go for an appointment till I was about 16 weeks, because they're like, what you gonna do for me? And the doctor's 2 hours away. That screws over a whole day. I have all these kids at home. Like, I don't want to deal
Mhm.
with that. So 16 weeks, that's why I was, I should probably talk to the doctor. Went in, and he's like, oh, so we'll just do the same thing as last time, right? Like,
Wow.
how about anything but that? Oh no, and I guess the other reason I didn't go that long is I applied for a midwife, but I put my address down as my parents because they live just
Mhm.
outside of the city where, like, I had only girl. And I got declined. So after I
Mm,
got declined, I was like,
yeah.
okay, well, I guess doctor is where
Was
we
it
go.
just, like, they didn't have space, or what was there?
Um, Saskatchewan has a lottery system, so basically either
Oh,
you win a midwife or you don't. So,
okay. Is it still like
and
that?
there, as far as I know,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's only, I don't know how many there are right now, but at that time, I think there was something like 7 midwives for the whole province. So there was only, like, I don't know, a couple dozen that got to have
Right.
midwives
Yeah.
in the year. So, I was not the lucky one. And it would have been a pain in the butt to try and have my baby at my parents' anyway, but
Right.
it would have been better than the hospital, probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I went to the doctor and he was like, "So I'll just do the same as last time." And I was like, no, let's not do that again. That was horrible." Um, so I took my rec for my ultrasound. I went and I found out, asked the ultrasound tech who, like, the gender, found out she was a girl, and never saw anybody again. I just went out and I was like, "Yeah, oh, fun."
Really?
So I told my husband, I'm like, "That's it. Like, I quit. I'm not doing this. Like, we aren't doing this." And he has been pretty traumatized by my fourth birth as well. So he was like, "Yeah, I don't want people treating you or my baby like that. Like, no, I don't." Uh, so he was on board with not doing the same as what we had done, but he was not real on board with free birth.
Mhm.
Um, he so I got him the birth partner, like
Yeah.
that book, and I sent it on his side table, told him to read it. I listened to a bunch of free birth podcasts, and I was like super confident. I was like, "Yeah, I can do this because I've done it this many times, and like 90% of what anything anybody did for me just made it worse or more complicated. Like,
Yeah.
the parts I did for myself were the parts that went smoothly."
And you already knew. Like, you came in with the knowledge and they were
Yeah.
like, "No, no, no." And you're like, "Yes, yes, yes." Right? Like, you think if you took
Yeah,
them
I
out of the equation, you would have just, like, had babies, like, with no trauma and
exactly,
hemorrhaging.
exactly, and it yeah. So, like, it turns out they're actually the problem in this equation. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
giving birth does not scare me at all. It's all the people I have to manage who are like, "Well, I'm trying to give birth." Like, I don't wanna have to tell you how to do whatever because 'cause I'm trying to give birth here. Um, so it ended up being, um, I was leaking for, like, a week before she was born, and I got frustrated, so I made my husband have sex with me in the shower. Like, I know that that isn't effective
Hey,
in
that's
actually
Cervidil,
listening,
man. That's
so
at-home Cervidil.
ex exactly, exactly. As basically like, I mean, I prefer his to the pig semen we were using, yeah, whatever. Anyway,
100%.
it made sense to me, and I was sick of leaking everywhere constantly, and only, like, a dribble, but it had happened with so
Mhm.
many other of my births that I was like, "Well, I know what this is." So I finally did that, and then that night, I got up, like, an hour or 2 later, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, these are solid contractions." And I had a friend, Sam, who was at Slovakia too,
Oh,
people.
yes. Yeah, I remember.
Yes,
Mhm.
so she was going to attend my birth, so I had
Was she a birth
messaged
keeper
her.
or just a friend?
Yeah. Oh, well, she was getting into it at that point.
Mm,
I would have
'kay.
been I was, like, the first person she was
Yeah,
attending, I guess, so,
cool.
um, I messaged her and I was like, "Oh, so I think this is the real thing." But the contractions were like 20 minutes apart, so like don't rush because she lived a little over an hour away from me and she had kids and it was like 3 in the morning. So I'm like, yeah, no panic, but be awake and maybe, start working on getting yourself over here, whatever. Um, and then maybe I think less than an hour later, I messaged her. I was like, yeah, so baby's coming. And I went to my bathroom and I started the tub because I was like, I can have baby in the bathtub because
Oh,
that's supposed to
yeah.
be like this super relaxing thing that they wouldn't have let me do in the hospital, even if I'd wanted to. Like, I get to do whatever I want. So I started the tub. I put one foot in and I was like, I think this is the worst idea I've ever had in my life. Like, just the feeling of, like, getting into the water was, like, awful. So I got up and I
Interesting.
went back to my bed. Well, so much for that idea. Um, I lay down and it was about 4:30 in the morning, and I, like, nudged my husband and I'm like, um, "We're having a baby." He goes like, "Oh, okay." Like, soon? Yeah, like, now. Um, so he kinda, like, woke up or whatever, and I went on my hands and knees and had a few contractions, and then I couldn't hold myself up anymore, and I kept, like, suffocating myself in the pillow.
Mhm.
And so I, like, roll me over, so I laid on my back, which again, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna do all these, like, better positions because 'cause I'm at home and I can do what I want," and I, like, laid on my back 'cause but I needed to slow her down because it
Yeah.
was so, like, just so fast. So by about 5:45, I was holding her, and we set her on my chest and heard a car door slam, and Sam walks in, and she's like, "Well, I guess I'm a little late," but honestly, I wouldn't have wanted it any other way because just
Yeah.
having me and Sheldon was so nice, and then having her walk in, like, right then was so ideal. Because then I just laid there and she, like, brought me food and water and cleaned up, and I'm just like, "This is heaven." I'm just laying in my bed cuddling my baby, and it
That's the midwife role, right? Like,
yeah, like,
that's what you need.
that's ideal. That is, like, could not have gone better if we'd planned it that way.
How did it go? Tell me about your placenta.
Um So I laid there for a bit, and then Sam went and got a bowl, and I was nursing her, so it started contracting, and it just kinda came out. I think it took about 45 minutes
Mm,
or so before, and honestly, I don't remember birthing my placenta for any of my hospital births.
mhm.
Like, I knew it existed.
Yeah.
But, like, what happened to it when it came out, what they did, how like, I couldn't tell you, like, that part of the birth story in any of my hospital births, I have, like, literally no idea, no recollection at all, except for Haslin, like, that was the number 4. Um, just it sitting on a tray beside me and them, like, poking at it and being like, "Oh, it's torn," and talking about it, but that's the only one that I ever saw, I
Mm.
ever, like, had any exposure to was hers. Yeah, so then with Ella's, I actually ended up getting it encapsulated,
Mm.
and I did that. She's the only one that I did that with since, I don't know, I to get into life story, I had a pretty traumatic year, her first year, and I'm not sure if it was the, birth and not being traumatized by that and having that makes a difference because usually after my other girls, I struggled quite a bit with, like, um, postpartum, I
Yeah.
guess, and I didn't feel like I did with her, but my situation after her was super traumatic. So, if there was ever a
Mm.
time that it might have made sense for me to be, like, losing my mind after I had a baby, it would have been after her, and I didn't. So, I don't
It
know if
makes
that
so
worked.
much sense, right? Like, to have to go
Yeah,
into motherhood processing trauma that happened to you and, like, "I'm not believed, I don't know anything," and then you enter motherhood, which is, like, all new with, "I don't know anything, no one believes me, I might be wrong about everything, things happen to me I didn't want to happen," and then you go into motherhood, that's
yeah, and, like,
totally
I need someone else to tell me everything because apparently nothing that I feel or think is the way I should be going, like,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I mean, I'm sure it's taken you some time and reflection to look back on those births and be like, "I did know, I was right, I was the only one who knew." Like, you're not, like, birthing your baby at 18 and knowing that, right? You're like,
No,
probably
no,
like, "They saved me." Like
I definitely never felt that way, and when I listen to other people say that about some of their birth stories, or like, "Oh, but the doctor saved me," like, the doctor
Yeah.
caused that, actually." I can honestly say, even right after I had my first, I still looked at it and like, "Why wouldn't they listen to me? Like,
Mm,
why wouldn't they?" But I guess they're just following protocol. Oh, well, like, they did the best they
yeah.
could.
Policy over people.
Yeah. Yes, that's my line. I say that all the time. Policy
Mm.
over people, and that's so wrong. Like,
Mhm.
you're here to serve me. Like, allegedly, the medical system is
Yeah.
not what they say. Like, you're here to serve us, and then you just chemo? Like, no. um, but yeah, so my fifth, she was over a pound heavier than any of my hospital births, and at least 90% less painful. Like, I would I would have said that even her coming as fast as she did, because like, active labor with a I never had any checks, I had no idea, whatever, but it was, like, max 2 hours. Because from me telling Sam that it was about 20 minutes apart, but they were, like, real contractions, to holding her was a little over 2 hours.
Yeah, that's
So,
fast.
yeah.
Mhm.
So it was intense, but it wasn't painful, and I guess with my 4th, one of the, um, things that I look back on that was, like just one of the things that's, like, it's so wrong and so common is I was sitting on the bed because when they were moving me between rooms or whatever, I was having a contraction, and the doctor came in, and I went and, like, "Okay, we need to check you, see where baby's at." And, like, "Hey, just give me a minute, wait till this contraction's done." And, like, what is that? A maximum of, like, a minute and a half?
Yeah.
The nurse went, "Oh, the doctor doesn't have that kinda time," grabbed my leg and, like, flipped me onto my back and held my legs out so that the doctor could check me, and, like,
Oh
wasn't
my
that,
gosh.
like like, why in whose mind is that okay? Like,
Yeah,
no, I
think in
said
any other
I
context, what would we call that? Like,
exactly,
not
straight up.
healthcare.
No, but that's one of I mean, there's a few things, like, in each birth that I can go
Mhm.
back to and be like, "Wow, who thought that was okay? Why was that okay?" But that was a big one that it was just like, I asked for a minute. I didn't even say no, like, because I wanted to know too, like, "Yeah,
Also,
how far
no,
out are
like,
we?"
no would be
'Cause
okay, but is not honored often, right? In hospital
yeah,
settings or when there's a
yeah,
registered healthcare provider present, it's often not honored
well,
when women
and
say
but the
no.
irony yeah. The irony in that one too is that my doctor was like same doctor, the, like, unicorn one, and he was like, "No, no, it's whatever she needs." It was just, like, this nurse who was like, "Well, we're doing this."
Yeah,
"Oh,
I'm sure sitting with
okay."
the experience of all these other men who get annoyed, right? And she sits in
Yeah.
service to them, so not to you, not to
No.
the pregnant person coming in, she sits in service to the doctors, which is how it was set up when you look back historically, like, what were nurses brought in
Yeah,
for? Not for the service of
yeah,
people, although there
exactly.
are so many lovely ones.
So yeah, so I had Ella, that was my 5th, and then I was like, "This was amazing," and my husband was was an all-star, like, "What do you need? What am I doing?" Okay, he just, like, sat back, he caught us, he helped me, like, move around when I asked him to, it was all good, and asked him after, I'm like, "So you were okay with, like, me having her out, like, it was okay, right?" And he's like, "Well, I thought you'd go into labor at work and you'd have to go to the hospital."
He's like, "It's just gonna work itself out."
Like, yeah, yeah, literally, because he never cracked the book. I was like, "Well, I guess you got some by osmosis," because, like, he had like, there was no thought whatsoever.
You
And
know what
then they're like,
I
"Well."
think I've realized is that, um like, sometimes the men who want to do all the prep are more like the controlling men who think it's about them, And then there's these men, like,
Yeah,
I tried to give my husband books before, like, we were gonna birth, even just with midwives, and he was just like, "Really?" Like, and I was so annoyed with him. I'm like, "Be on board with me. Like, do you know how many books I've read? Like, how much work I've done?" I'm like, "Really, his
exactly.
work, what do I need him to do? I want him to, like, get me water, like, hold my hand."
Yep.
And he really trusted that, like, I was gonna do it, and he's right. I am the one who's gonna birth the baby. He's not. He's gonna do what I tell him to do, right? And,
Yeah.
that he was, like, knew that before I knew that. There's something beautiful about the men who just roll with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what he did, but it I was more concerned that, yeah, like, well, I don't want you to, like, be totally clueless, but, like, what
Mhm.
did he need to know?
Yep.
I don't know. Those grab the scissors? Ah, that was
He
the
just
most
needed to trust
technical
you.
part of and and totally did, and
Yeah.
so it was and it blew the doors off too with, like, wow, this is what birth is supposed to be. And, like, now I'm like, well, probably a good thing I didn't free-birth from the beginning because 'cause I'd have, like, 20 kids, but,
So
it
true.
was,
I get it.
like, literally addicted, um,
Yeah, it's a huge high. It's yeah.
and to explain that to anyone who hasn't had, like, even, home birth with midwife experiences, at least I feel like probably a little closer, but,
Mhm.
like, your standard hospital births and you go, "Oh, I would love to have" they're like, "What's wrong with you? Who
Yeah,
would want
because
to go through that?"
I think you come out, like, out of my first hospital birth, I came out thinking the birth was traumatic. Not that what happened to me in the hospital is traumatic, because I think I had said this to you, like, I had, like, the natural hospital birth. There was, like, the beautiful hospital birth where I was like, "Holy, that was insane. No one should do that without drugs," or, like, "No one told me." Like, "What just happened?" And I was really like, became a doula to save people from birth. That's what I thought needed to happen, right? Not like birth can actually be beautiful when you are mentored into your own power, into what you can do in birth. But when it's taken away from you, it does feel when that power is taken away from you, it does feel traumatizing.
Yeah, and that's what most of it is, like, I don't it's generally not the physical stuff of birth that's the issue. Your body can
Mhm.
handle most of that, like, it's that's just part of life, but having other people impose on it is not, like, it's not natural. The story I tell people regularly is, like, if your cat or dog was having puppies or kitties, whatever, you leave them in a dark room in the quiet because if you make like, if it's too noisy even, let alone you poking at them, it's not gonna go well, like,
Yeah. Like, if you Google
why
it, it
don't
literally says that don't touch the cat, don't look at it, don't put the lights on, you could kill the cat or her babies. Don't
Yeah,
do it. And they were like, "But
well,
humans, I'm gonna get the fluorescent lights, I'm gonna get those, like, tongs, the
as
forceps," you
many
know?
people as possible
Yeah,
to,
and we're all
like
gonna watch her and make her be in a position that's convenient for us, and then that will be
yeah,
the safest way to have babies, and we all believe it.
yeah, like, how
Mhm.
are animals held to so much higher esteem than
Yeah, we're
humans?
all mammals. We're all
Yep,
mammals. Yeah.
it's yeah. Um, yeah, so I guess and then with Oriana, that's my youngest, um, I actually got a midwife. There's some life stuff that was going on there too, but, so I got a midwife, but I went to her and I went, "Okay, so we're clear. I want you to do absolutely nothing." She's like, "Alright." Like, "And I'm not calling you when I have her." "Okay." So,
What were
I
you
went in,
wanting from her? Like, when you got the midwife,
the
what were you hoping for?
the paper trail at that point.
Yeah,
Um,
that is helpful.
yeah, so I would go in, go to the appointment. I did not weigh myself. I did not take my blood pressure. I did not do any tests. I did no blood work. I had no checks. Nada. I go in and we chat. How you feeling? Oh, pretty good. And how's life going? All that kind of thing and chat. So like half an hour or so minutes, whatever my appointment was, and off I go. And she was a COVID baby because she was born in January of 21.
Mm,
So that was like the thick of it was when I was pregnant.
yeah.
Um, so some of my appointments were just over the phone, and that was super convenient for me because that was all I wanted anyway. Adult conversation.
Yeah.
Whatever. So then when it came down to it, I went into labor. I sat in the bathtub for a bit. My teenager brought me soup. Uh, then went I went to bed, and then still the other kids to go watch a movie, and my husband sat on the bed beside me and played on his phone, and about 15 minutes before she was born, I told him to call an ambulance, but I can't do it. I'm which I said with every single one of them
Yeah.
at,
That's a
like,
common thing I hear when I go to birth.
20 yeah.
As soon as you
The
say that,
last
I'm like,
20
"Oh, your
minutes.
baby's gonna come out any minute now."
Yeah, straight up, like, "Can't do it. No, I don't." And husband's kinda like, you really don't have a choice at this point." And also, at that point, he was, "'Kay, but you understand, if I call somebody, I can't come with you. I will not be with you because of the restrictions that are in place right."
Mhm.
And
Right.
I went, "Yeah, don't want that, 'cause if we go back to birth number 3, I worked
Yeah.
really hard for that not to happen." Um, and so I was like, "'Kay, okay. Yeah, you're right. I don't want you not there. So let's do this then." And I had her, put her on my chest, and called the midwife. I was like, "Hey, guess what I did?" So I can't be right there. So she came and, um, yeah, held a bucket under me to have my placenta. Yeah, so she, like, helped clean up, and I their policy was that I had to pee before they said leave, so they made me get out of bed to go to the bathroom, and I didn't want to, um, but I got up, and I went to the bathroom, and when I went to leave, I fainted.
Ugh.
Well, like, caught me and went down gently, but honestly, I think that it was so unnecessary, and that is, like, felt like we did so good. We made it through the full pregnancy, the birth, and everything, and we, like, shunned protocol entirely, and this is how we ended. Like, that was kind of frustrating, but it was super minor. Like, it was nothing, but I definitely wasn't ready to get up at
Something
that
to
point.
note though, right? Like, again, about your own knowing and about the interference of having someone else there, and not necessarily that everyone needs to not have someone there, but to know that when you bring someone in, and we often, like, give away our power to those people, right? So when she's like, "No, you must pee so I can go." I mean, you really theoretically could be like, "Nope, then move in." Like, or, "You are gonna go." But that's so hard to do in those moments. That's so hard. So yeah, you're just gonna get up and do what they ask you to do, and that's sort of the piece of, like, when you invite someone in, what are they bringing? And
Yeah.
what sort of power do you give them?
Yeah. And
Somebody to
even, like,
consider.
this super well-meaning and,
Mhm.
like, was absolutely as hands-off as a medical professional could be, basically, because she wasn't even there.
Yeah,
Um,
and she was okay with that.
like, uh, I
I mean, she still, like, kept you in care, right? Like, she didn't.
yeah, 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 and I think I got the only midwife in that entire area that wouldn't have balked at me. Like, she she was amazing, honestly, like,
Mhm.
could not have like, that was definitely a, like, God moment, like, we're putting this woman in your path because she's the only one that can do what you need, and she was. Like,
Mhm.
and, the partner that she had with her, I stressed out to no end, because like, they work in pairs, uh, so at birth, they bring, like, someone as the backup, right?
Mhm.
And her regular partners, but the regular partner had been at a birth until just before I gave birth, so she couldn't come, so the another lady came, and she, like, carried shepherd's purse,
Oh,
and,
nice.
like,
Yep.
she was so and she was, like, a very like, the oldest midwife in the group and was very much, like, honored the fact that I was like, "No, we're not doing any of the stuff." Because when I fainted, they were worried that it was maybe bleeding, even though there wasn't really any,
Mhm.
but it's kind of like with test. So my youngest was 11 pounds when out, and her placenta was huge as
Mhm.
well. So I had just lost a lot,
Yeah.
and my blood pressure tanked, I guess, probably because she was huge. Um,
Well, and
because
birth
there
is a
wasn't really
lot,
any bleeding.
right? Like, birth is
Well,
like
yeah,
a whole
regardless.
hormone ride. Like, I've definitely felt really
Yeah,
like, if I stand up, I'll fall over after every birth.
yeah,
Like, yeah, even though I'm
yeah.
not hemorrhaging, I'm just like, "Whoa." Like, so much.
Yeah, but it was, like, presented to me that, like,
Mhm.
well, we could do something about it, and that was when, the other midwife was like, "Well, I have shepherd's first. Would you be willing to have some of that?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that."
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
so she put it in, like, a glass of water, a couple drops, and just, like, sipped on that for the next hours in a glass of water. I was like, "Yeah, I I was willing to concede on
Yeah.
because it felt much better than, like, a shot of Pitocin or whatever, like, that
Yeah.
wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so overall so I had a midwife for her,
Mhm.
and it was a probably as good of an experience as that could have been for me and for what I actually needed from a midwife, and it did make, like, the other stuff, like the paper trail and stuff, a lot smoother. Because with, uh, my step I trying to get her birth certificate, like, I had to fight so much for all it was so stupid, like, that was a whole thing.
Was that in
Like
Saskatchewan?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and my youngest was born in Alberta, but then I had a midwife too, so that, like, she just signed off on everything as if basically she was there, so it
Mm.
well, I think she was allowed to say she was there because she was there when the placenta came out,
Yes.
right?
That's how it
So
is in BC. If the midwife arrives for the placenta, then she can sign the notice of live birth, and then it's just like they do the paperwork for you. But if they're not there, you have to submit all your own. But it is like it's a lot of paperwork, but it's not it's, like, pretty straightforward.
yeah, so with Ella, like, my Beth, uh, I think I blew the poor lady at Vital Statistics' mind when I was trying to explain that, no, the only person there that could, like, sign as a witness was my husband, and, they like, I submitted stuff, and they send it back, and I submit it, they send it back. It took, like, months, but I would hope at this point it's a little more streamlined, like, I figured it's a possibility, but, like, they had never heard of it. They're like, "What?" And she's only
That's
6, like, it's not
incredible.
that long ago. What do you do when babies come like, my brother-in-law was born on the side of the road 35 years ago, like,
Yeah.
that it's a thing still.
Yep,
But
precipitous birth. I kinda think it like, from what I've seen, it's, like, people who had midwives, historically, like, they would just sign the notice of live birth for a precipitous birth, so, like, a birth that happened too quickly, and
yeah,
then there's, like, an uprising of free birth happening now for all the reasons one would understand if they hear all your birth stories, right? Some reasons why women are choosing not to birth in the system and not birth with
yeah,
registered professionals, and so, like, new policies are coming out from the colleges saying unless you're there and you see that placenta come out at least, you can't sign
yeah.
anything.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
midwife did say, she's like, "It's" because when I told her I wasn't gonna call her for the birth, she's like, "If you can just let me come within, like, 24 hours, that would be
Mhm.
great." I'm like, "Okay, sure, yeah, we'll do that."
Yeah, she sounds
So
very chill, like,
I
very
think
respectful
she
of
would have been
choice.
willing to, as long as she was there within that 24 hours, like, not necessarily for the placenta, but I
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think in BC, I don't know how it is in the other provinces right now, but I think that, recommendation or, like, what the college is telling midwives to not sign unless they're there for the placenta, I think that came down maybe in the last year. I'm not sure
Oh, yeah.
because with my 2.5-year-old, I didn't call them, and they still signed the notice of live birth, but for they didn't even wanna take me to care for the baby I just had. So yeah, so
Yeah.
things evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or devolve.
Yeah, right? They continue to change. That's right. Yes. Um, oh, well, thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you, so one more thing, you kind of alluded to this and when you were talking about your fifth baby, but how did you feel like so now you've like had this another experience of this sovereign birth where you are totally in control and in power and like how does that influence your mothering? Do you find that it does like and you're like the woman you are as you mature? Um, do you like, how does that play a part, or
It's
does it?
ki I think it does. Um, for me, it's a little hard to be like, "Oh, yes, this is definitely, like, the line," because she's also my 5th, so how much is me evolving as
Mhm,
a mother just seeing, like, "Hey, I did this and it did not work," or whatever. Because I definitely got to the point, and it was right around when I decided to, like, say no to the system, where it was like, "You know what? You can give me all the advice you want, but there's nothing saying I have to take it." Like, just because you say and you want me to do something, I still get to evaluate whether or not that's actually best for me. Like, and that was the turning point probably was when I decided to scrap going into the hospital to have Ella. Like before I even had her, I think that was a turning point where it was a, you know what? Actually, I know best. And I definitely know best for my babies. Um, yeah. And it was probably mostly just, like, in my head, like, it clicked. Like, it's not something I ever struggled with or thought. It's just something of what I didn't think about that, like, if my elders and, like, my I don't wanna say my mom because she's not like that, and she didn't give me much advice in the way of, like, "No, you're parenting wrong." It's like
mhm.
she was pretty good about, like, "I don't know, does that work for you? Do it then," you know? But just I think the general public, where they like, "Oh, is that what you do? Do you think that's a good idea?" And I was just kinda like, "Oh, I guess if that's what everyone else is doing, sure." And then around that time was when I was like, "Actually, no, I wanna do what's best for my babies, even if it is the opposite of what everyone else is doing." 'Cause I've seen the
Yeah.
world. I don't necessarily think I want my kids to turn out that way anyway.
Yeah, totally. I love how
Like,
you saw the pattern from the beginning, right? Like, that you didn't have to go over that hurdle, like a lot of us, I think I've had to get over the hurdle of, like, believing they knew better, right? And then being like, "I guess I was wrong, like, I guess they know all the things, I don't know any of the things." So I had to, like, get over that before I could get to the point of being like, "No, I do know, and I'm gonna take back the power." And it's just like you saw those trends from the beginning, like, "What are you talking about? How could they not believe me? Obviously, this is what was happening to my body." And then, like, progressing in your own, like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna let that happen again."
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It for me, it was more not knowing, but it was acting on it and not being worried about, like, what someone else was going to think. Because,
Yes.
like, it was one thing to know and be like, "But I'm
Mhm.
sure." Like, I'm sure," but then not knowing what to do about it. Like, even though
Right, we're
I'm
so
sure I'm
conditioned
not
not to be rude, like, right? Just to be
yeah.
like, "Okay, whatever you want, like, I just wanna be easy, I'm the good girl." Mhm.
Yeah, and 100% that was, like, my entire personality was like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, I'm gonna make sure everybody likes me," and like, "No,
Yeah.
you know what? Nobody has to like me. It's fine."
Yeah, I'll like me.
Yeah, that's way more important.
Totally. Oh, thank you, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. Yes, it was
Yeah,
great.
thanks for having me.
Yes, I love it. Those stories are so powerful. We need more. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to be notified when new episodes are released, you can hit subscribe. New episodes come out every Tuesday. Please share this podcast with your friends, family, anyone you think might be inspired by a good birth story. Write us a review if you'd like to be part of spreading more peaceful and powerful birth energy everywhere. You can check the show notes for how to submit your own birth story. We'll catch you next time.